just reviewing the Fletcher versus Peck case because I have a PhD in Fletcher versus Peck. A lot of people don't know this, but it's one of the most influential cases in American history. The Fletcher versus Peck case is one of the most significant because it was one of the first times that the Supreme Court shot down a state law on constitutional grounds. It was also one of the first times we had a strict interpretation of the contract clause. But that was the end result. Let's go back to the beginning. In 1795, the state of Georgia passed a land grant called the Yazoo Land Act that gave the Yazoo land a 35 million acre region that was taken from Native Americans to 4 independent land speculators for very cheap prices.
This land belongs to the state of Georgia. Please evacuate now. Go! Leave! All this beautiful land for a very, very cheap price. And you can get a beautiful view of the Yazoo River. How you feeling?
1 year later, Georgia legislator voided the Yazoo Land Act with the claim that it was fraudulent. One speculator involved in the act was John Peck, who in 1800 acquired land that was part of the original legislative grant in 1795. Once Peck acquired the land, he then turned and sold it to Robert Fletcher for $3,000.
The beautiful Yazoo River over here, which reminds me of the Yazoo Act of 1795 that split up Georgia land into 4 territories among private owners. You get all this land, 13,000 acres for just $3,000. What do you say?
Are you sure all of this is legal?
Of course it's legal. It was distributed by the state of Georgia themselves. It's a deal.
What's happening here is that Fletcher is buying land from Peck. However, when Fletcher discovers in 1796 that Georgia legislators voided the land, he ends up suing Peck in the long run.
Hey, Peck.
Fletcher?
The land you sold me was illegal.
It's your land now, not my problem.
I'll see you in court.
It was later found that 3 of the 5 legislators had been bribed. Man, I'm kind of on the fence about the Yazoo Land Act.
I think it's pretty unconstitutional, but you never really know. It might pass.
Ooh.
I think it's pretty constitutional now.
7 years later, after a long and lengthy process, the Fletcher versus Peck case was then taken to the Supreme Court for further ruling.
The Georgia legislators split up the land between companies, but then made it void. But it was passed on multiple times before it got to me. I was just continuing the deed, and Fletcher got the bad hand.
Although the land was passed down multiple times before it got to Peck, he knew that the land he was selling me wasn't his land to sell, so I should be compensated and get my money back.
Never, Waluigi!
When a law is in its nature a contract, when absolute rights have vested under that contract, a repeal of the law cannot divest those rights. The court rules that Peck was an innocent third party who had entered into 2 valid contracts, first when he paid for the land from the original grantee, and second when he sold the land to Fletcher. Peck thus fell outside the original fraud the Georgia legislators sought to undo in its repeal. That Peck is not guilty. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility.
As you can see, the Fletcher versus Peck case is a very underappreciated court case in American history. This was the first case in the history of the Supreme Court in which a state law had been invalidated. The decision of this case enforced the Constitution's superiority over state laws. By ruling for Peck, the court ruled that Georgia did have ownership of the land, deciding that based on an article of the Constitution, a state's law wasn't allowed. Well, that's enough Peck and Fletcher talk for one day. Hope you enjoyed.